You want to hit the record button?
Thanks,
or wait?
Maria. Always need that reminder because I forget. Well, welcome everyone to this presentation of Haelan House. Want to, if you are not familiar with who we are, Haelan House is a nonprofit organization here in Central Oregon whose mission is healing the root cause and effects of trauma, creating health, resilience, and wholeness. And part of the way that we do that is to give people tools, resources, and education about what trauma is and ways to heal, as well as directing people to different forms of support. And so we try to combine those things in these educational sessions. My name is Cheryl Mills. I am one of the co-founders of Haelan House, and Suzanne Freelow is the other co-founder. And then we have Maria Cookson, who is our secretary of the board, and she is also going to help facilitate this meeting that we have today. Just real briefly, we want to you can ask questions. The best way to do that is to utilize the chat button at the bottom of your screen. You can just type in your question, and Maria and Suzanne will kind of keep an eye out on those questions. And if it's pertinent to what Nicole is talking about at the moment, we'll ask the question then. Otherwise, we'll hold it until the end. And does anybody have any questions before we start?
I'd just like to plug the Healing Trauma Conference that's coming up on May 1st and 2nd. We're in the works of that. So anytime that we can plug that and to start spreading the word, we are going to go virtual again this year. So yeah, so just keep an eye out for information on that. So we have some amazing speakers lined up. So I'm getting very excited. So yeah, just a little plug there.
Way to go, Suzanne. Good job.
Yes, way to go. Yeah, and then I will probably be putting a couple things in the chat that Nicole may reference. So, and also if you have any questions, but I will put those in the chat for anyone that would like that information too.
So you can jot those down too as we go along, and we'll put together a resource that if you would like that list of things that we're going to put together, you can just send us an email at haelanhouse@gmail.com, and we'll give you that again before we end. Today, I want to introduce Nicole Spreadborough. We appreciate her being with us today to talk about healing emotional trauma. She is an LPC, which is licensed professional counselor. She's at the St. Charles Outpatient Behavioral Health. And after she graduated from her master's program, Nicole began working at the Juvenile Justice Department, providing family therapy services. She then moved to Deschutes County Behavioral Health and was assigned as a therapist to the Kids Center. She worked primarily with children and teens that had a history of emotional, physical, and/or sexual abuse, using EMDR therapy, and we'll talk about what that is, and also worked with their families, providing attachment-based interventions. 5 years ago, she decided to move to St. Charles Outpatient Behavioral Health, where she could see children, teens, and adults, and continue to provide both individual, family, and couples therapy. Her areas of specialty are focused on trauma and attachment, using EMDR, internal family systems, and attachment-focused therapies. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This is an honor for me. So I just want to plug that I'm by no means an expert in this area, but I do have lots of thoughts, and I've learned a lot about attachment and trauma, and just want to share that information with you guys. So I've had lots of great teachers along the way. So Cheryl, did you want to kind of keep where you wanted to ask the questions, or?
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
And Maria's going to start, and it'll just be a kind of
Great.
an interview dialogue.
Yes. So welcome, Nicole, and welcome everyone. We're happy to have you here and talk about attachment today. And so that is my starting question is, can you explain what attachment is for all of us?
Yes. Yes. So I'm going to start out with what attachment looks like between a parent and child relationship, because I think then we can move into what that may look like for adults. Dan Siegel, you're going to hear me reference quite a few people. I did send a list of book ideas to Maria and Cheryl, so they can provide that later. But Dan Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson have written several books on, he has done so much research on the brain. And really what they're coming up with is for a child to feel secure in their relationship with their parent, 3 things have to be pretty consistent. 1, they have to have a felt sense of being safe, both emotionally and physically. So, no humiliation, no demeaning, no those kinds of emotional injuries, and then being physically safe. Are they free from harm in their home? The second S is being seen. So having this felt sense of being seen. And I don't know if you guys have ever had this in your life, but I know that when someone can kind of have empathy for me and say to me, oh, I can understand why you might feel that way. I can feel it in my body. I can feel it on a cellular level. And I think that's really what he's talking about between the parent-child, that the parent can really look at the child, attune, catch the cues of what the child's doing, and really be able to say, oh, this must be what you're feeling. And that kid can kind of internalize, wow, I'm being seen. The last one is comforted and soothed. So when something happens, a child falls and trips outside, and a parent runs over and says, oh my goodness, are you okay? That looks like you scraped your knee. Let's go take care of that, and kisses their face and says everything's going to be okay. That slows the child's nervous system down, like, okay, I've got somebody I consistently can count on to take care of me and soothe me in those times. When, as children, we have that relatively consistently, that creates, for adults, that creates in relationships this expectation that I'm going to be in a relationship and I'm going to get my needs met. It sets us up for, I'm going to look for a partner that when I reach for them, and this is Dr. Sue Johnson's words, when I reach for you, will you reach back for me? And I'll talk a little bit about, really what that looks like. But Dr. Sue Johnson also talks that adult relationships are similar to the relationship that a parent and child would have. And those 3 things that I talked about from Dan Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson are sort of the same things we're looking for in adult relationships too. When I work with couples, the complaint I hear the most is my partner doesn't understand me. I don't feel seen. Or I feel dismissed often, like, oh, I'm feeling really sad. This happened. And then my partner says, oh, well, why would you be sad about that? So I think, kind of really looking for that in our adult relationships is important. And really feeling like we can count on our partner to comfort and soothe us in times of distress. So that was probably a long-winded version of attachment. Sorry.
No, that's okay, because the following questions will kind of hopefully help tie all that together.
Okay, good.
So how does trauma affect attachment, or how are those 2 things related? So inherent in
in traumatic events where we are not getting comforted and soothed, or it's ongoing, it's complex trauma, most of the time we are alone in it, and we are in distress in it, and we don't have somebody that is soothing us and protecting us. That creates difficulty to trust in not only our decisions, but difficulty in trusting the world. We view the world as dangerous. We can't, a lot of clients that I've worked with really have come to me and said, I don't trust anybody. I barely even trust you, Nicole, which makes sense. And we expect that. So trauma not only impacts the way that we can self-regulate, but we can't even count on our relationships, our current relationships, to be that comfort and that soothing, because the view of the world is dangerous. For most of us that have gone through trauma, the world isn't safe, and attachment and trauma, the first thing that our bodies need is safety. We can't love if we're not safe. So trying to engage in adult relationships, whether or not it's romantic or not, and trusting in that relationship really depends on, can we self-soothe and feel safe in that? And a lot of times trauma really takes that security away from us.
So just so I make sure that I understand, so if I'm a kid whose parent was not consistent with, or didn't know how to relate or respond to me in a way that I felt safe, then I just carry on that feeling into adulthood, unless I've dealt with those feelings.
Yes, thanks for tying that back. Yes.
Okay.
And I also want to be clear that we all have, okay, so I have a 25-year-old, and I know I have some cringe-worthy parenting moments. I mean, I know, but what my husband and I were able to provide for him is that when he was upset, he could access one of us and we would soothe and comfort him. He knew that we would protect him emotionally and physically. And so yes, did I miss times, and did I say really stupid things like, oh my gosh, I can't do this with you right now. Can we just, go away from each other? Yes. So there are times where I didn't really attune to him and meet his needs. And what the experts really say about that is, if we have those missed opportunities, we can repair them. So if I missed that opportunity with him and I went back to him, a couple hours later, and I said, gosh, I just realized you were trying to ask me something and I didn't pay attention to that. And I'm sorry about that. And can we talk about that now? That's the repair. And what experts are really saying, and even in adult relationships, is that repair is critical to create that safety and that security. And so it's not, it is, yes, that parents are not consistently doing that, but it's also about parents not consistently repairing that, what the attachment world calls that disruption. So if that disruption of the parent not attuning, not having empathy, if that continues to happen, that creates a lot of fear and anxiety. So if you're parenting or you miss a cue from your partner, it's whether it gets repaired or not is, I think, the big piece that helps our nervous systems.
Oh, great. Thank you. Yeah, that helps.
That helps. Yeah. So like if someone is consistently being in that like distress and disruption and not having those repair moments, or those seeing that you can do things better, then you're going to be probably repeating, or you may be following, like when you get older or other relationships, you're do you gravitate more to that kind of, or even if it's not safety, it's because it's something you know, or is that part of the way that the attachment works unknowingly?
Well, and I think, so here's what we know about our brains and about how wonderfully resilient we are as human beings. Our brain, when we're younger and those needs aren't getting met, our brain adapts and finds ways to protect ourselves.
Mhm.
So if as a child, I had more this kind of anxious attachment style. Like I really wanted my parents' attention, and I found that if I like tripped and fell, that's when I got their attention. I would start tripping and falling more because that was meeting my need. Oh, I'm getting my parents' attention.
Mhm.
Same with kind of pushing people away. Oh, I notice I feel safer if I just kind of hide and I make myself small. So we do these wonderful things to protect ourselves when we're younger and to survive. Because when we're younger and we're in distress, if we don't have people that can comfort and soothe us and take care of us and help us through that, then we're going to create these coping strategies. Oftentimes, if that's not dealt with, we don't understand that internal process, we'll then move into relationships where some of those same things may play out. I think, so like you said, Marie, I don't know if it's fully, conscious, like, oh, I'm going to, go into this, but, oh, this worked for me as a child, and I'm going to sort of do the same thing because this is what I know to make sure my heart feels connected to someone, because
Right.
we're hardwired to be connected to other human beings.
Yeah.
So-
And the patterning and consistency we like, that helps the brain, I think.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
So I have a question.
Yep.
Since emotionally abusive relationships are kind of my history, having that history drew me to abusive partners. So can you kind of explain how that would happen in terms of, not getting those needs met? I know they're not being met, but then I find somebody who's just like my parents.
So there is a therapist in the EMDR world that has written a book for therapists around trauma and attachment and really using EMDR. She's a fabulous EMDR therapist, and she uses this analogy that when you are parenting your child, it's basically you are holding up a mirror. So child therapists often talk to parents around, a parent needs to be able to understand a child's inner process and reflect that back to the child, so the child then can understand about their internal, how they feel about themselves. So if you're constantly getting humiliating, demeaning remarks about yourself, you're internalizing that and taking on, well, I'm worthless. I'm not loved because I'm not worthy of love. We all kind of internalize those negative beliefs. So I think what happens moving into relationships is sometimes we believe this is the only thing we're worth. So I'm only worthy of this kind of human being and this kind of treatment. And so, we end up in those relationships.
Okay.
I think is the easiest way to explain it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you explain then what is a securely attached relationship, what that looks like?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's actually not a whole lot different than a parent-child relationship. Actually, it's feeling emotionally and physically safe. It's when I'm around this this person? Do I feel, is my nervous system, calm? Do I feel safe? Can I feel that in my body, both emotionally and physically? And, I'm just going to talk personally. I mean, sometimes my husband and I joke around and we'll joke around. And so I'm not talking about, that kind of sarcasm or that joking. But if the sarcasm and the joking is always, towards me, or a partner is just demeaning and that doesn't feel emotionally safe, then that can tear down the safety. So really, that the safety, the emotional safety is, do I feel supported and cared for? Being soothed and comforted is big too. Like when when I have a bad day, who do I turn to help me through that? Who do I turn to help me process what happened during the day? And then the last one is just feeling seen, really feeling seen, and knowing that you're validated. Can your partner, I think the hardest thing, in my work with parents and couples, the hardest thing is teaching people to have empathy and validation. And what we actually know, what the experts say, is that if you can validate another person's experience, if you can have empathy for another human being, that is one of the quickest ways to decrease that activated system. So when our nervous system thinks there's threat coming in, and we go into fight or flight, or we go into freeze or shutdown mode, one of the quickest ways to start helping someone feel safe is to feel validated, is to feel empathy. And so for another person to have empathy and validation is part of that felt sense of being seen, and is pretty important in relationships, both parent and child, and adult relationships. Dr. Sue Johnson, and I can send this to you guys. In her book, Hold Me Tight, it's called the A.R.E questionnaire. And that stands for, the A is, are you accessible to me? When I need you, are you close in proximity? Are you close emotionally? Can I access you? When I reach for you, do you reach back? The R is the being responsive. How responsive is your partner to you? And then the last one is engaged. And so I can send that questionnaire if you guys just, I think it's a beautiful outline of really what you're looking for in relationships. And they don't all have to be true. But you want, for the most part, it's just a true or false question, and you're gonna, you want most of those to be true.
Sounds like something to use while you're dating.
Yeah.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
So on the resources I sent to you guys, there is another lovely therapist out there, and his name's Stan Tatkin. And he has a book called Wired for Dating, and then Wired for Love. And the Wired for Dating is exactly, Cheryl, what you were saying, that it takes a lot of these same concepts and just talks to us about what does that look like when we're getting into relationships? How is our body responding? And he talks a lot about attachment. What's our attachment style? So that would be a good book.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's see. I had a thought there. Yeah, I guess, well, and that's like how do people with everything, like, since we are more in trauma and the just full center nowadays with COVID and all that stuff, is that playing into some of that where of the attachment, or how is it, I mean, are you seeing different things now with that, with the attachment, or is it just heightened more, or where is that kind of going, or have you seen anything different?
The isolation's terrible. Dr. Sue Johnson talks about in one of her books, how detrimental isolation is to us. And I know that people are really struggling, especially if they live by themselves. People are
Mhm.
really, really struggling to feel connected to others. I mean, our survival, I mean, we're hardwired to survive by being connected to another human being.
Yeah.
I think of the animal world, and if a mama bear moves away from her cub is vulnerable, and that cub is going to try to seek mom out, and their survival depends on that closeness, that proximity of that mama bear. And we're a lot the same way. And this isolation, I think, has been very hard on people. We're seeing an increase in anxiety and depression. The suicide rates are going up. So I think the isolation is not good. I understand
Right.
why we're being isolated. I can have empathy for that part, but I think for our mental health, it's not good because, and I was also talking to colleagues, and I think there's something even that thankfully we have Zoom and we can kind of still see people, but there is a difference of feeling. There is that being near another human being and feeling that person near you. There is definitely a difference. So hopefully we will get to whatever normal is very soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be good.
Mhm.
When we were talking in preparation for this presentation, you mentioned co-regulation. Can you
Oh, yeah.
explain what that is?
Yeah. So co-regulation is, from a parent-child standpoint, it's the parent's ability to stay somewhat regulated. Their nervous system is not so activated, so they can't be, they can decrease their nervous system so they can stay emotionally present for their child. And the same thing is true of in adult relationships, so that there is another person that can help you move through the emotion, can help you understand, process the emotion. um, and I know oftentimes when and I've heard this mostly in couples therapy, is that, well, my partner wants to fix it. And it's not about, okay, well, what can you do about it? Because we know dismissing, that can be very dismissive of our feelings. It's about a partner saying, I'm right here with you. I'm going to hold your hand. Tell me what happened. Let's walk through that. And that co-regulation is really being able to help another person move through an emotion and an event or a situation. In adult relationship, it's reciprocal. We help each other co-regulate. When I'm upset, I can go to my husband and he can stay regulated, and I can engage with him and he can walk me through it. And then, vice versa, I can do that for him. In a parent-child relationship, it's always about the parent staying emotionally present and being able to help the child regulate through their emotions. It's okay. Yeah. Wow. That was really hard, wasn't it? Wow. Yeah. You were really hoping you would do well on that test. And staying regulated and helping them make meaning of it and understand it. And then soothes their system down. I think a big piece in relationships is about staying emotionally present for people.
May I just give an example? Because
Yes.
that is totally
Yes.
something's coming. As soon as you said that, it brought up a memory.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, my sister and I, when we would go at it, if I could remain calm in that situation, because we were in a fight, and if I could remain calm, that changed the whole scenario.
Yeah.
She could be yelling and blah, 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 but if I could remain calm, but I didn't always succeed, because if I took it up to that level, because I'm yelling back at her, it blew up, right? But if I could remain calm, which is hard for me to do sometimes, it did. It changes the whole dynamic, the whole situation. So I totally could relate to what you're saying there.
That is a great example. The example I use with some of my parents, some of the families I work with, is I'll say, I used to be very afraid of flying. And for me, my co-regulator was the flight attendant. Like if it got bumpy and that flight attendant was still walking up and down, or, and had a calm look on her, I was fine. But if I noticed anything, if I misattributed what that flight attendant had on their face, my nervous system was activated. So,
Wow.
yeah.
You also mentioned EMDR. Can you define that acronym and then tell us how that works in working with attachment issues?
Yes. So EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing. It is a therapy that's been around for over 30 years. It's been researched very heavily. And what EMDR does is it helps people go back into memories that have been stored, what we say is dysfunctionally. So it got stored with our childlike, most often our childlike perception of what happened. And it goes back into those memories and really helps process those memories so they're stored differently. They're stored in a way that's more adaptive. They link up, because what happens with trauma is it gets kind of stuck in our brains and it doesn't link up to, oh, but yeah, remember that one time that we were able to, I was able to run away and get away and I kept myself safe. Those trauma memories can't link up to those adaptive things that we did, or adaptive memories. So it helps go in and process what happened, but then also link up to more adaptive information. Like, oftentimes children will think abuse is their fault. So in their childlike thinking, that makes sense because that's how they would process that. But for an adult to go back into that child memory and say, oh, but that wasn't my responsibility to keep myself safe. That was about, my parents not doing that, or it's not my responsibility that I got hurt. So it's about being able to go in and process that information. So, yeah. And EMDR is one of the top therapies. I mean, there are other therapies, but EMDR is one of the top therapies that absolutely work with trauma and attachment. It's great for attachment trauma also.
Great, thank you. And my understanding is that only licensed therapists can provide that kind of a treatment. Is that true?
You have to, so they don't have to be licensed, because a lot of times when people graduate, they have to be graduated from their program. So they have to have their master's, or higher in their program. They can get trained. So they don't have to be licensed, but you do have to be a master's level clinician.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there several people in Central Oregon that do that, or?
Oh my gosh, we have a huge EMDR community here. Yep.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
That's
huge.
Yeah.
I think we can open it up to questions. If anyone who's on the call would like to ask Nicole any questions about what we just talked about.
I have a question. I'm not sure if am I muted?
Nope.
Nope.
We can hear you.
You're good.
Well, I've noticed for me that I have an anxious attachment style. So, and I'm working on emotional regulation and distress tolerance training. I'm working on that. And I find that when I make like a new connection, a new friend, or someone I'm possibly interested in dating, it becomes painful at times, because I'm expecting to be met at this certain level and I'm expecting too much. And I see myself doing that, where I'm expecting a little bit too much in the beginning. And because I'm used to, in the past, when I was in an abusive relationship, it was all love bombing and it was all this, I just can't wait to be with you and all this stuff. Now it's like, I don't want to do that. I know hopefully I'm not going on too long. There is an ending to this.
Oh, no.
You're
Yeah,
fine.
you're fine.
But so yeah, I'm finding right now that I'm really struggling with giving space, with trying to do this more in a healthy way rather than, you know, what I've done in the past. So
Yeah, which is really normal. You know, and since you brought it up, I think the other important thing is we can have different attachment styles. You know, like with me and my husband, I can have a different, sometimes I can, you know, be a little bit anxious, and then I can be really secure with him. And then maybe with my son, I can feel a little anxious in that at times. So our attachment styles can also be situational. You know, we're not, for the most part, it can be all, we can have security in some things and then anxiety and maybe avoidance in other things. But what you're describing is actually really normal as you're trying to learn about yourself and moving into a new relationship. I mean, it's hard not to get excited about new relationships.
I don't even
So,
feel excited. I feel like on guard, and I feel like, oh, I shared too much, or I just.
absolutely, which makes sense to me, because of course you're gonna, you know, of course you're gonna be like, well, I don't want this person to reject me. I mean, our two biggest fears in life, well, for the most part, two biggest fears are really being rejected and abandoned. You know, and that's primal. You know, that's survival. So, um, I think being wary, being worried about being vulnerable, is really normal. I think being cautious about relationships is good too, because you're also, you know, going into it and trying to decide what's healthy for you. Is this relationship meeting your needs? But it makes absolute sense that you would have fear about, did I say too much? Because if I said too much, then I'm going to be rejected. Or you know, did I not look good enough? You know, all those things that come in that, you know, kind of bring the fear part into it. I don't know if I'm answering your question or not, but
You did. Thank you.
Sounds like that book might be helpful that you recommended, Nicole.
oh, the Wired for Dating.
Wired for Dating might be helpful.
Yeah. The other
Yeah.
author that I didn't mention, and he does a lot of, he and his wife do a lot of couples work, is John Gottman, and his last name is spelled Gottman, I think. But he talks a lot about trust in relationships, and he's done a lot of research around it. So, another great resource.
So is there any like tools, like if like I was feeling anxious with, you know, the dating or just even in a new relationship or something, is there, besides feeling that anxiousness and then going kind of down that negative rabbit hole, is there any tools that you suggest? I mean, other than just having that awareness and start trying to be self-love on that, of just saying like it's okay, or is there anything that you would suggest to kind of just have a little bit of movement to, so that maybe that next time I'm not so anxious, or something on that
Well, I
spiel?
mean, Maria, I think you hit it. I think, you know, really being aware of, you know, kind of, you know, how we feel in relationships, being aware of that. And I think the other piece too, and just like I said, that if somebody could have empathy for us, how that calms our nervous system, we can actually do that for ourselves too. If we can have compassion and empathy, which I swear is harder than having it for someone else, but if we can turn that on internally, that actually does the same thing. It can calm our nervous system down. I think really being, oh, I'm getting that my internet connection is unstable. So if I lose you, I'll come back in. Sorry.
Okay.
It's
But
okay.
if I think really just understanding our attachment style, and knowing what we want. I think really understanding what our needs are, because I think especially as women, we don't always look at what our needs are and how
Yeah.
those are getting met in relationships. And I think that's critical.
Yeah. So Aaron is asking a question. Is showing empathy the same for everyone, or do we have different needs in receiving empathy?
Oh, that's a good question. I see empathy as being able to understand and validate another person's experience. So I will often tell couples and parents that if you extend empathy to someone, it doesn't have to necessarily be correct. Like if a kid looks really, really mad, if you say to that kid, "Oh, you look really, really upset right now," it may not hit exactly how they feel, but that gives the opportunity for the kid to feel seen. And then that, your kid might say, "No, actually, I'm feeling really sad about this thing that happened." Aaron, I don't know if I'm answering your question or not, but empathy is really about validating and trying to understand how the other person may be feeling. And it doesn't have to be exactly spot on. I think just making the effort that you're trying to understand where another person's coming from is healing in itself, because you're being emotionally present.
Erin, and feel free to unmute yourself if you feel comfortable in doing that, unless you feel that Nicole answered your question, but feel free if you feel comfortable to unmute yourself.
I have a question. I'm trying to find a therapist in this area. I'm new to Redmond, to Central Oregon.
Okay.
I am trying to find a therapist that does inner child work and reparenting and all, that kind of thing. And I haven't had much luck. So I was wondering, do you give referrals at your center? Is that something you can do? Or I'm just going by my insurance and what they're telling me. And
May I respond?
It's been a struggle. Yes, please.
Hi, Teresa. My name's Lynn Lawner. I'm on the board of Haelan House, and I was in practice in Redmond for many, many years as a licensed clinical social worker. Have worked also with children and couples. And Nicole, thank you for your Wired for Dating. And in fact, that's an aside, because I'm curious about how many of us who do have trauma backgrounds, I do as well, who are now out in the dating field as an older woman, and what that's bringing up for me as well as many others. But I wanted to get back to you, Teresa. When I sought out my own therapist in Redmond, you live in Redmond, is that right? Okay, now I can't hear her, but okay.
Yeah, she said yes.
Okay, great. Yeah. Peg Beaton is an LCSW here in Redmond. I went to her, and I also went to her because she's a little older too. I didn't want to go to somebody who was 25, having been a therapist myself. And she's very experienced. She's very good. She is doing. She is able to do like Zoom or, even just phone calls that might be helpful. But let's see. So her name's Margaret, and she goes by Peg, Beaton. And what I can do as we go on here, I'll try to put it in the chat, her phone number for you.
Awesome. I would appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you, Lynn.
Yeah, absolutely. So the second piece is, I'm curious, how many of us older women are out trying to date? Nobody?
Teresa said in the,
Teresa, Maria, anybody else?
no, I'm married, but I did want to ask that question the other way.
I'm not trying to date. Right now, we're doing friends first, but yet it gets confusing because it feels like we're dating. So,
How you get triggered, even
Yeah.
when you're out there, and depending also on your experiences that you've had up to this age with a partner. So anyway, I'd love to see that as a topic maybe in the future. And I will, I'll go look for that phone number for you, Teresa, and I will mute myself again.
Thanks,
Okay.
Lynn, for that.
You
Yeah,
bet.
thank you, Lynn.
You bet.
Nicole, Erin unmuted herself. Erin, would you like to speak?
Oh, yeah. So I think I was asking, well, I guess what empathy looks like from different people, because I think I feel like I'm being empathetic by like validating emotions for people, but I think my husband doesn't seem to think that that's empathetic. What he really wants is for me to ask him what I can do.
Okay, so you're right, and maybe I shouldn't phrase it like that. Your idea of empathy is how the experts say empathy is, and what it sounds like your husband's wanting is for you to really check in and be curious with him. One of the gentlemen I did and sent in as a resource, his name's Daniel Hughes, and he talks a lot about really being curious. And it sounds like, Erin, maybe that's what your husband's wanting is can you be curious with me about what I need? Can you stay emotionally present with me? So Dan Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson, one of their main parenting strategies is connect and redirect. And connect is that empathy part, but direct is also be curious. So maybe that's something that you could do with him is validate him, but also, then say, well, gosh, what are you thinking that you need?
Okay, yeah, I was just wondering if that's just people have different needs on what means being empathetic to them.
Right. And empathy really is that validation piece of it. When we're talking about empathy, it's really validation and understanding of another person's experience. So, that's how in the therapy world, empathy gets explained.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
I feel like I'm choppy. Did I answer that okay?
I think so. I think I always had an idea of what it was, and then I was just shocked to find out that he thought I wasn't empathetic. I'm like, what?
Right. Yeah, and a lot of people mix up empathy and sympathy too. And so I think how you're describing it sounds like that's empathy.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And I can just throw out there that sometimes people aren't able to ask for exactly what they want. So they'll say it in a way that's kind of vague, make some weird comment, but what they really want is more of your attention or, something like that. So in my experience, sometimes the communication is just, I'm like, you want me to figure out what you want, or can you tell me,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And that's Dr. Sue Johnson's book, Hold Me Tight, talks a lot about dialogue and how to have dialogues within, an attachment framework. There are a lot of really smart people out there that have written some really good books about attachment, thankfully.
And I'm thinking, when is the right time to start asking for what you want? is it, I mean, I have trouble asking for what I want, but then I think to myself, when is the appropriate time to ask for what I want? At what point in a new friendship or in dating where, you're not, I don't know, does that make sense?
Yeah,
You're not
absolutely.
asking too much too soon.
Yeah.
So, because they may
Right.
not be on the same page that you are. So,
Right. And I think it really goes back to, so I'm sorry, I'm referring to all these people because their work's brilliant. So, but Stan Tacton, the Wired for Dating author, he talks that our brains, our bodies and our brains go to war first and then they love. So really what he's talking about is that our nervous systems have to feel safe and trust the other human being in that relationship before we can move into more loving feelings. And so I think what Teresa, what you might be describing is, maybe do I trust this person enough to be physically and emotionally safe, and to care for me? Do I trust that person? Are they consistent? Can they show up be emotionally present for me before I really ask them to meet my needs? Does that make sense? Like there has to be trust first because you want some predictability. Being predictable in a relationship creates safety.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So if relationships are, you have someone, friend that's unpredictable and doesn't respond to you the way that, you feel like meet your needs, then you're not going to want to put yourself out there.
Right.
But if that friend is being predictable and responsive and you trust in that predictability, then maybe it might feel safer to ask for your needs to be met.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, the trust, thanks, Nicole, that trust can be a tricky thing because
Yes.
there are times when you feel like you're being trusting or you're showing it, but then others will say, well, do you trust me? Or they're putting up that, like, you don't trust me part. So I don't know how that plays exactly on some of this attachment and where things are, but I know that's been a learning curve for me with some of that and some people sometimes and stuff
Yeah. And I think, trust and safety really goes back to predictability. I mean, one of the things that is so crummy about trauma is the unpredictable nature. Even though sometimes we could predict our environments and we knew what was coming, there was still that, and it wasn't predictable all the time. And that creates our nervous systems never to be able to settle. And so, really being able to trust that the person's going to respond to you in a safe way, and they're going to respond to you in a way that is, respectful and caring, takes a while. And that trust is earned. It's not, people can't, like I often say to parents that their trust has to be earned by their child. If that trust is broken, they have to earn it back to their child. So I think when people ask for trust too soon, that might be a little distressing for a person.
Yeah. And some of that is, I think too, like especially if you're still feeling that, like the trauma, and maybe you're still kind of feeling like being like in the child's view, even though you're adult, you're still kind of that way. I don't think the cues are always there, or you don't, if you haven't had that consistency, and you've had those broken safety and everything.
Yep.
So that's
Yep.
be challenging.
Yeah. Yes.
Hi, this is Lynn again. I'm hearing a lot of question about, what is an empath? And it's very typical for particularly women to have assumed a role of being the empathic person. They often also hook up with narcissistic people. And that doesn't mean a person who just stares at himself all the time in the mirror saying how good I am. But there's a dynamic here that we're really just beginning to discover, and the relationship to early trauma again. What I learned was I had to do to get, and I became a therapist because I was going to help everybody else.
Oh,
Uh-oh. Thanks.
I think we lost Lynn.
Yeah,
Darn it, she was on a
She was
good
on a
roll.
roll.
yeah, she was on a good point there.
I think your time is short, isn't it, Nicole? You probably have to get
Okay.
your next appointment. So I want to thank you so much for being with us today, and sharing this information, because I know, at least for me, it's incredibly valuable, and to be able to have some more resources to look into, to just help us moving forward with the relationships in our lives, whether they're, you know, romantic or family or whatever.
Yeah, it was, I feel so privileged that I was asked. So thank you for reaching out. I love what you guys are doing. What a wonderful resource for our community.
Thank you so much. And again, for anybody who wants those resources, just shoot us an email at haelanhouse@gmail.com. And this session will be, the recording will be on our website, which is haelanhouse.org. And just get in touch with us anytime. And thanks again for being here.
Yes, thank you.
Great day.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole.